Thank you so much.
Is Europe and the European Union a good place for a company to be, digitally speaking?
Well, I would say we have a few challenges actually. 2/3 of our future unicorns actually goes to the States or to Asia in the 2 first growth round.
Do you hear you say that this market, as we all praise as a good thing, basically is an obstacle to SMEs?
There are still obstacles that are not removed. We have a large amount of common regulation, but it's implemented in national ways. So imagine you are an SME, you are maybe 50 people and you've reached a certain size and you have limited capacity to grow and limited number of resources. Okay, then you are dealing with data and you will have to go from one country to another. All of a sudden you have to deal with maybe 6, 7, 8 different authorities to know that you are compliant in the country with the GDPR rules. It can be many other things. It can be the tax system, it can be the skills that you want to transfer that are not the same, it can be different kind of compliance rules depending on the project that you are actually delivering. So it's still extremely hard to do business and grow across border in Europe, yes.
But I also hear you say that it's maybe not the regulation as such, but the implementation or lack of implementation that seems to be the problem.
Exactly, both the lack of implementation and that you have the implementation still on national level, meaning that, you know, people work with people. You need to go there, you need to know the authorities, you need to know their way of implementing and interpreting the regulation. I think the regulation as such, for example, GDPR is absolutely really great, something that was needed, timely, everything. But the implementation did not make Europe and European companies more competitive for sure.
So here we have a lot to do.
Lot to do.
When looking at the past 4 or 5 years, it seems to me as a lawmaker that citizens and consumers, things have been moving pretty fast. I mean, so it seems at least. But in your world, is it fast enough or are we already lagging behind?
Well, on regulation, I would say in Europe we are quite safe. I think we are the most regulated continent in the world, and we tend to be extremely cautious. You have the American way where you innovate, then you learn, and then you might regulate or self-regulate, where in Europe we tend to regulate even before damage has happened. I don't know how many cases and court cases there are on AI, for example, and we are also already discussing, you know, what can possibly go wrong with AI.
But is that an argument for not having regulation?
I would say it's an argument for how you regulate and how you implement. I'm a big believer in sandboxing, that like if you are a private company, you would actually develop the product, then you would, you know, test it, you would do many different tests and trials with your consumers before you bring it to market. In policy, it seems that you make a regulation and then you decide it's like this and then you implement, but you don't know really the consequence of it. So I would say in technology that we actually, you know, spend a lot of time after the regulation is kind of finished to see how do we implement it in the best way. Let me give you an example. So we have the DMA and the DSA. They are implemented with a European mandate, but these companies, most of the companies in scope are quite big, means that they have a lot of resources. Whereas the GDPR, again, as an example, if you are 50 people, you don't have 120 lawyers who can deal with regulation implemented in different ways in Europe. So we need to start thinking about how can we test the regulation with different sectors, with different type of SMEs? How can we actually really discuss it, what effect it will have on their business before we launch the implementation?
The Commission has proposed a new legislation for data sharing of industrial non-personal data. What are your expectations for this legislation?
As long as we know exactly what does it mean, when can the government sector actually come and ask a private company to share the data? So we need to be very concrete, and it needs to be emergencies. If companies don't share data with their suppliers or with their chains, I think they will have a hard time competing, but I think it's not a public sector problem. I think it's a private sector problem.
Yeah, but don't we need regulation to force this?
No. I honestly don't understand that kind of thinking. I mean, we have private sector, we have public sector. Private sector needs to compete, amongst others, based on how they use data. If we're talking on really kind of competition violations in market, we have competition law already to address that. But to go to a company, a Danish company that is really good in green data, in how you reuse of water or what, and ask them to share the data with their competitors, I think that would be that would be very drastic to take their IP like that.
You're basically questioning the whole Data Act here.
I'm questioning the business to business.
That's a big part of it.
It is a big part of it, but there are many other provisions. There is government to business in emergency cases. There is the cloud switch, more interoperability between cloud switch, etc. So there are other things where I think there is a general dialogue to take. But to ask companies, basically any company, to open up their data for everyone, well, I think what we're doing now is building the data spaces, which is a really good idea, because if you are a clever businesswoman or man, you will see that if you share data, you get data, and then you can enrich your own data. But the business women or men who doesn't know that, well, okay, I don't think they're going to be in business long anyway, but I don't think it's up to the public sector to force that.
Lastly, if you were to design the digital regulatory space, talking about spaces, for the next 10, 15 years, what would you do?
I would reform how we implement and how we regulate. And I would most likely look for much fewer and not national implementation bodies. So you can go one place and you know that you are compliant and you know how it works all over Europe. Right now, one of the biggest cybersecurity risks is you have a breach. You are a SME, you have a breach. Who do you call? You know that it spreads from Denmark to Germany to Spain in a matter of seconds. Where is the response? Who do you call? In the energy sector, in the educational sector, in the health sector, we have seen a huge increase in hospitals being attacked. I mean, we need to change the model and the governance on how we do it.
But the good news is that we have NIS 2. It's just running through the basic...
Yeah, but this is only for critical entities, right? But do we have a response? So if it goes wrong in one place, This is coming. This is coming, exactly. It's coming in December.
Yeah.
And I'm looking very, very much forward to it.
Cecilia, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so
very much
much
for taking the time.
Thank you so much.